Good morning, my name is Fabian Bonilla. I work in the support team of Artec, and I would like to share with you the continuation of the presentation by Lucia, the previous presentation. This is more or less the stages of the methodology that they have just explained, and I will focus on the last of those stages, on the development stage, specifically explaining how to work in that development stage with GeneXus. To sum it up into just one line, and to tell you what this stage is about, well, here we will go from paper to bits. We will go from this to this. And this, and we will analyze in detail here how we develop these smart device applications. We applied the methodology for the integration of development design for this application. And following these steps, everything began with an email that Lucia sent us, with many things included. We had the mock-ups of the navigation screens for the application, in which creation process we had participated, because this is a whole integrated development design process. We had design guides, which are images of what the screens need to look like, where we also have specified the type and size of fonts, colors, where each image is located. And then we will have components that will be used in the development per se. For example, images, clippings that we will be using in development in the GeneXus KB, and also the color palette. And here the important thing is to see the values of the colors that we will use. This has been predefined, and now we will begin with the development. We always need to bear in mind that even though this is a new stage in the creation of the application, this does not mean that we were not already involved in this before. And this does not mean that the designer sends us this and then he forgets about everything. No. Depending on the stage we are at in the creation of this, one of the actors, either the designer or the developer, is more busy than the other one. They both participate throughout the whole process of this creation. How did we do this in GeneXus? Let me make a brief comment before to introduce these two concepts that make up the design of a smart device application. And more or less, I have categorized all the issues that we will see into these two groups. First, everything related to the user experience of the application, that is to say, the interaction and the navigation flow that our application will provide the user with, and then the user interface, which are all those elements that will help us develop the aesthetics of the application so that the user experience looks good. Let's begin to see the main points to develop our UX in our application. First of all, we will always have a start screen, a home page. We will probably show a menu with options so that the user starts navigating within the application and he can go wherever he wants. GeneXus provides us with an object for that, which is the dashboard object. It is very easy to use these objects. It's quite basic. You just list all the options for that menu, and then you indicate how they will be shown, how they will be displayed. In the case of the event application, we defined that we wanted to have it in iOS, we want to show a tabs menu, and in Android we want to have a table menu. Same menu, but shown differently. The reason for this is to follow more or less the common practices in terms of designs for platforms. We did so by marking the control property of dashboards with the platform default value, which is the one that gives us this behavior that we wanted to attain. We can also choose whatever value we want, and we have the list mode, table mode, or tabs mode. Then we found the concept of list and detail. In the speakers screen, we will have a list of speakers, and we want that by selecting one, we need to have a detail of those speakers to see the bio, the previous presentations, where he will be participating, etc. And we saw that we define this for other places of the applications as well, for presentations, tracks, rooms, hotels, favorite presentations, etc. And this concept is also seen in most applications. In most SD applications that we're going to build, we will probably have to include this design pattern as well. And for this, GeneXus gives us an object in order to work with this feature, which are the work with for smart devices. What we do is to associate this object to a transaction, and GeneXus generates a series of screens structuring the information of that transaction in this way, in the SD detail. This is the work with for smart devices for the speakers. GeneXus generated a list where you will have a list of speakers, then we have the detail of each speaker, then it automatically generated a link between both of them, and then we have the detail, which is generated as a function of other elements, which are the sections, which are certain types of information. We have one for general information, and then we have another section for presentations. GeneXus, for defining the structure, takes into account the transaction or the table we are applying this to, and according to the relationship with other transactions, this scheme is generated. Even though this was generated by default, and we used it like this, we just made some changes in the layout, but basically this is the structure defined by GeneXus. But we have the freedom to change this. We can create new lists, new details, or new sections. At the same time, in the design process, we define that in order to show the detail of a speaker, we could take advantage of the characteristics of the devices. In a tablet, we have a larger screen, maybe a screen where we will be able to show more information at the same time than in a smaller phone screen. So, in a phone, we will be showing either general information or the information of presentations, whereas in a tablet, we want to have all the information in a single screen. Since we have more space, let's add more information. So the idea of all this is to be able to take advantage of the device's features and to obtain a design that looks good according to the device, so that it looks neat and does take advantage of all the features of that device, in spite of Rodrigo's face over there. I don't know if Rodrigo is here. How do we do this with GeneXus? Through the possibility of defining multiple layouts. In this screen, we have the same object with two screens, with two different layouts, one for iPad, one for the iPhone. In the iPad, we have two sections, one after the other, whereas in the iPhone, we defined a header with a picture and the name of the speaker, and then we separated both sections with a tab. Like this, the rest of the sections of the object are shared, and we have multiplied the layout. This possibility of having multiple layouts does not only cover the device type, but we also have the possibility of defining this according to the platform that we're running and according to the orientation of the device. This could be structured in a table with two columns, and when I rotate the device in order to take advantage of the new layout, you could use 4 columns. And thus, the design would look good in any orientation of the application in the device. On the table, you see all the possibilities you have for defining layouts. We can have as many layouts as we want in each panel. And this is a feature of panels. Within a same object worked with for smart devices, we can have multiple layouts in the list, in the detail, and in each section as well. Then, details have one more characteristic, which is that besides from all the combinations of different layouts, we can also define different layouts according to the data, whether they will be shown on the view mode only or whether they will be edited. So that's the edit mode that will allow us to either delete or add things in the associated transaction for smart devices. In tablets, whenever we have detail in an insert mode, a pop-up window appears. This generates a much nicer and much more practical design. In the event application, we have one place to enter data, which is a photo gallery, and there what we did was to precisely use a work with for smart devices, and we used the detail of that work with in the insert mode. In that way, we opened up a pop-up window. This picture was added later on. It was not included there at the beginning, so I will need to ask Federico what happened with this picture. Finally, in terms of the user experience, an important component of the application are grids. We will have several grids in our application. For example, lists, which are lists of information that are structured through grids. And when it comes to defining the design of the application, it's important that they have a good user experience. We need to provide them with good aesthetics, good design, so that it provides good interaction for users, so that they can interact with them. I will show you some of the grids of the event application. First, we have the presentation list. Lucia had mentioned something about this. We want then, when this is deployed downwards, we want to have a search field so that you can enter text and quickly access a specific presentation. How do we do this with GeneXus? Well, it's quite simple. In the tab conditions of the object, that's where you will define all the properties associated to the user experience. We have a search there, search button, and we add all the attributes there for the search. We put the abstract there, the description, the title, and the speakers for the presentation. And just by doing that, GeneXus automatically generated all the conditions necessary for running that search and added the interface, the search field, and the possibility of showing that on top of the list. On the same screen, we wanted to sort of interrupt the way the information was shown. We wanted to divide information according to the groups and according to the time those presentations would be made. We wanted to have a break in the layout of data, and we added that in the conditions. We put a break by in the orders. We added an attribute, which was the time for the presentation, and GeneXus automatically generated that in the list. And it also automatically added this in the interface, not just the features, but it also modified the interface. It added the bar that would separate each group of presentations in the list. It adds all the values, etc. And one component that we always need to define in grids in the application is the order in which all the data will be displayed. In the list of speakers, we said, let's sort them out by last name. But we also realized that this list would have a lot of information. We have more than 150, 160 speakers. So on the right of the screen, we wanted to add an indexer with the different alphabetical letters so that you could quickly access the information of some speakers. How do you do that? You set this in true that's associated to the corresponding order in the enable alpha indexer. So it's quite easy to handle all these grids. Just by a few clicks, GeneXus gives us a lot of features. So far, in terms of the elements that GeneXus gives us to develop the user experience that we have defined for the application. Let's now see how it helps us to develop the user interface. How does it help us to make that user experience look nice? The main role here is played by themes here. From the very beginning in our tech, since we started developing for smart devices, we followed a line whereby all the aspects that related to the screen design, the specifications of the user interface were added into themes so that everything was sort of centralized in these objects. So they became more important. They give us more value and we need them more. You will see that when you develop in smart devices, at every time, at every moment, when you modify objects, themes are open because we are continuously adding classes or querying the ones that we already have in order to use them. And continuing along the line I've already mentioned in terms of layouts, also, for a same application, we can have one theme, one different theme per platform or device type. So, this has many uses. Common practices or standards in terms of design for each platform varies quite a lot. They're really quite different. So it's necessary to have more than one theme if we're developing for more than one platform. We can have a specific class associated to a control, and then we can create within Android, we can define it in one way for Android and another different definition for iOS, and this will be resolved automatically by GeneXus when it creates the application. Well, continuing with the user interface, one of the visual components that are important for our application are the images that will be displayed, the ones we will see in that application. You will agree with me that this list, even though both lists have the same information, they have a different layout. We will find that in our database, we found in our database that we had the pictures of some speakers, and the sizes and dimensions were quite varying. Some of them were large pictures, small pictures, horizontal pictures, vertical pictures. So we didn't like what the design looked like, so what we did was to assign a class of that theme for that image and to give it another aesthetic. First thing we did was to add rounded borders, so we used the property that's called border radius, which is quite useful. And at the same time, we wanted all images to have, all pictures to have the same size. but we don't want them to look weird since they originally had different sizes. So with the property content mode, when we're working with images, it's very important to take this property into account. We said, well, we want the image to be expanded, but we want it to keep the relational aspect that it originally had. Some of the pictures might look cropped, but however, the design looks much, much better. These are minimum things, but ultimately, when it comes to the application design, they're really very important. Another specific property of images that we used in the event application is a property placeholder image. This property allows us to put a default image in an image control. So, for example, when images are being uploaded, maybe from databases or from an internet URL, and depending on the condition, this might take longer or not. And while this is being uploaded, we see the placeholder image. But besides from that, we have all the comments from the presentation, but we have the possibility of adding comments via Twitter or directly through the event site, event website. So in terms of Twitter, we show them with what the Twitter user entered. But even though we wanted to show all the comments together, the ones from the Twitter and the ones from the website, we used this type of image in the placeholder image. And now, continuing along the line of images, Lucia mentioned this before. This is specific for the iOS platform. But if we're going to develop, we will be creating an iOS application, and we need to bear this in mind, which is the Retina Display. What is this? From Apple onwards, when iPhone 4 was launched in 2010, it included new technology in its screens, which is called Retina Display. And the main characteristic of that is that for the same screen size, you have more pixels. They are smaller, so you have a larger quantity of them. And resolution is much better. This is called Retina Display because, according to them, the human eye would not be able to see that image in a pixeled way. So, what happens? The necessary images to be run in a device with a Retina display screen need to be larger. At the same time, we need to consider that maybe the application will be run in devices that do not have this Retina display feature, for example, iPad 1 or iPad 2 or iPhone 3GS. And when we develop in GeneXus, we're developing for multi-platforms. So we're also developing for Android or BlackBerry as well. So in terms of image management, even though we need to take this into account, at the same time we need to be able to develop for multi-platforms. So GeneXus gives us a mechanism for managing this issue that we need to resolve in our application. So the GeneXus developer will develop its application in a normal way by using the images he needs, created the image objects that he needs for the application, and once this is ready, what you do is you go to the image list, the image object of the KB, and all the images that were used in the smart device application need to be duplicated. And the new objects have two new features. One, that their size is double than the size of the original, and the name is changed with -SX. So when we create the application for iOS, all the images are added, and then the application is compiled in Mac, and in runtime this is correctly solved through the Retina display. So to sum up, you don't have to worry about the Retina display except for the fact of replicating your images on the KB. So, if you saw the picture at the beginning, in terms of the things that Lucia was sending us, you might have seen that all images were duplicated. One in their original size and then the other one that was double the size. And in terms of themes, we have many more properties and elements that will help us in the interface development. They're all properties with very specific features, very specific things. And in order to explain this better, I will show you a specific screen for the event application by using table management and color management and the properties of tables and colors. This is the list of presentations for the event application. Actually, this is the main screen, but in the event application, there are many of them, and all of them have this design. When we defined the design for the application, we said presentations will have one or several topics or tracks, and each of those tracks will be identified with a specific color. And this color is defined by the designer, and then he or she sends us the values. And we wanted that each of the lines of the presentations had a track identified with color, with a bar, with a color bar, and also by adding color text in the track with the name of presenters with the same color, so that each presentation would have a different color. At the same time, we wanted that whenever we selected one of those lines, in order to have a more detail or to see the presentation, we wanted to have the whole block painted in that color that's associated to that track. How did we do this? Basically, we used two things. First, all the class management within themes, in the controls that we have in the layout, all of them were related to colors and highlighted colors when the elements are selected. There are several highlighted properties within classes which define the aesthetic of the interface of that element, of that control, when it is selected. So, we had the presentation grid, a control grid, and we defined what each line looked like. First, we had a table that took all the grid row, and we added background color and then highlighted background color, because we don't want the color to change. On top of that table, we added another one, to which we said it should have a white background, and when it was selected, it should have the color that was associated to the track. And on the right, we added some space so that it was always visible, one part of the background table, and it would be that sort of bar that you see next to each presentation that identifies the track. We also assigned a class to each text, adding the color associated to the track, type of font, and then the color white. What happens when the lines are not selected? There you have the effect of the properties of background color or font color of text. And when we select the line, then they change, and then all the highlighted properties come into force. This is not very complicated, as you see. And now we move on to something else. Once you have defined what the row looks like, in the same grid you will need to paint each row in a different color, because each presentation has a different track. How did we do this? By dynamically uploading the classes. First we defined several classes, one per each track or color, which is what we needed. And then we loaded the classes in the load element of the grid. So that's how we obtained the design that we had previously determined. As you see, it's quite easy. And here We're not using no new concepts from GeneXus. Every GeneXus developer already has been using all these concepts from a long time, even though they were not programming for smart devices. And like this, we obtain an important feature for smart devices as well. And this is how we obtained the interface that we had defined with the designer in prior stages, in all the sketches that we had, in all the design guides. This was very easily attained with GeneXus. More or less, this is everything that I wanted to share with you today. It's not the only thing you can do in terms of design. There are many things that GeneXus gives us in terms of design. But we wanted to show you this associated to a real application that we did. All this method that Lucien and Alejandro have explained, plus all of this was what we actually applied in order to create this application. So we followed this line of methodology. Also, I wanted to tell you that GeneXus really helps in terms of design. You will be able to develop applications for smart devices, not just powerful and functional applications, but GeneXus will help you achieve nice applications. Finally, I would like to invite you to other activities that we have in the event that are related to smart device design. And if you want to get into more detail, all the documents are on the wiki, but I also recommend you the tips blog, which is a blog where you will find tips for smart device development in general, but most of them are related to applications design. That's it. Thank you very much.